What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. If you guys enjoy this rookie content, we're coming at you with part 3 of our How to Evaluate series. If you enjoy this rookie content, our draft guide right now is 50% off, only $15. Link is in the description. And if you enjoy this video, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Now let's get into it. We are on to part 3 of the How to Evaluate series, where I go through and I talk about my process on how to evaluate each position, what matters, how to watch the film, how to find the film. All that stuff is included in these series. If you guys haven't already watched QBs and RBs, I already did those, and this is the third one on the docket. The wide receiver position. We talked about the running back position probably being the most important in fantasy, and QB probably in a super flex as well. The wide receiver position might be the least important in fantasy. And the reason being is because there's great wide receivers in the NFL all over the place. They're a dime a dozen. Most good offenses have 2, maybe 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers on any given week. That being said, though, spotting superstars at this position is very important. And one thing that I would like to encourage you to do is that if you're going to evaluate receivers, shoot for ceiling. And the reason I say that is because you have floor receivers all over the place. You can find Golden Tates everywhere. You can find Sterling Shepherds everywhere. Sorry, Giants, you have 2 floor wide receivers. But if you would have shot for ceiling in the past couple drafts, you may have hit on guys like DK Metcalf. You may have hit on guys like Brandon Ayuk, who had low floors, but with context and their situation once they were drafted, were able to land in places that fostered them reaching their fantasy ceilings, essentially. So that being said, this benchmark part that I talked about for the quarterbacks and running backs is probably the most important for this position. What are the benchmarks for wide receivers? For starters, this is the most important takeaway I want to get through before we get into this. Every situation requires context. There is no one perfect stat to determine future success. Most people are too lazy to evaluate everything, and people will just go, he has a great breakout age, or he doesn't have a good breakout age, or whatever stat that they find most important, and say that determines fantasy success one way or the other. But when you actually dig into situations, when you actually give them context, for example, Terry McLaurin at Ohio State played for a monster powerhouse school that had plenty of talent, including Paris Campbell and a number of other players on it. So him having a late breakout age or no breakout age is partially due to the fact that he has so much talent around him. I've talked about this on numerous occasions for the 4 Alabama wide receivers, Judy, Ruggs, Waddle, and Smith, all did not achieve the production that they would have achieved if they were alone at some TCU or some random school like that. So that being said, there are definitely some similarities, though, between elite receivers that we've seen the past couple of years and the guys that have finished top 12 over the last 3 seasons. So on the screen right now, you'll see a data set of wide receivers who finished top 12 in points per game from 2018 to 2020. And some takeaways and benchmarks from these guys include weight, 190 pounds, and this applies specifically to Devontae Smith this year. 18 of the 24 guys on this list were over 190 pounds. So that is definitely the ideal size for a wide receiver. 15 of them were above 200 pounds as well. So height, 19 out of 24 were above 6 foot. Odell, Antonio Brown, Tyreek Hill, Tyler Lockett, and T.Y. Hilton were the guys that were under 6 feet. But again, as with any position, size is definitely usually a benefit for most positions. Here's one that didn't matter too much, so take this one with a grain of salt. But speed, 4.6 40, 22 out of 24 ran faster than a 4.6, and a 4.6 is not that fast. So only 11 players ran faster than 4.45, which I would consider fast. So high-end speed is not as important. Just don't be too slow, essentially. So a 4.6 is a good benchmark for thinking of when these receivers are running their pro days and combines and stuff, and you hear that X receiver ran a 4.73, like that's not good. But if a guy runs a 4.4 versus a 4.38, like it's really not that much of a difference. It doesn't really matter that much. But here's one that does matter. Draft capital. For every position, draft capital is important, but especially for wide receivers. 20 out of the 24 top 24 receivers or top 12 receivers of the last 3 years were top 3 round picks. Talented players tend to translate better. It's just a fact. And especially for wide receivers, I think in this type of class where it's a super deep wide receiver class and everyone has their guys, like I really like Elijah Moore. Some people really like Rondell Moore. Some people like this guy, that guy, whatever. If whatever receiver you like gets 4th, 5th round draft capital, it almost automatically disqualifies me from taking them anything higher than like a 3rd round rookie pick, because that's just kind of the way that the wide receiver position works. It's a very replaceable position. And if you don't have the trust of a coaching staff, the opportunity in front of you, then you don't really have a chance to succeed all that well. So college dominator, here's another big one. 23 out of the 24 wide receivers that finished top 12 over the past 3 years had a college dominator rating above 30%, meaning they received 30% of the total receiving yardage and touchdown production in college. If you aren't the number 1 receiver on your college team, how are you going to be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy? That's basically the way you want to look at it. And the only exception to this rule was Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill had a number of like off the field issues in college. So that's probably what the case for that was. So I would say almost all the time, you want to be getting a top receiver on their team. And if they're not a top receiver, they better at least have a good share of the production if they have another talented receiver on their team. So here's the big one. Here's the one that everyone talks about. Breakout age. 17 out of 23 had breakout ages under 20 years old. So it matters. It does matter to be producing at a young age, but good breakout age does not equal an elite prospect necessarily. So as you can see, there were 6 exceptions to that rule. That's over 20% of the people that were on this list. So it's not like it's a one-to-one translation. I would argue that college dominator is much more important than breakout age. Again, these are all benchmarks. Very few guys meet all of these in addition to good film plus good landing spot. It's when you start seeing holes everywhere that you need to be concerned. For example, I really love Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith to me is an excellent prospect. He has holes, right? He has holes in his weight and his breakout age, but his breakout age can be explained, as I mentioned, by the fact that he went to Alabama with 4 other first-round receivers on the roster. But Smith is so great everywhere else. His film is excellent. He's going to get high draft capital, probably be in a decent landing spot, that I am comfortable betting on Devontae Smith despite the weight concerns. Rondell Moore, for example, has more holes in my opinion. He has the height and weight concerns that Devontae Smith doesn't have height concerns, but he has the weight concerns that Devontae Smith has. He has film concerns, in my opinion. I didn't really like his film all that much. I thought his hands, route running, football IQ, and toughness, all those kind of factors played into him not really having that great of a film grade for me. And plus, he has some medicals too. He hasn't been very productive in the last 2 years because he can't stay on the field. And also, he's a very scheme-specific fit in the NFL, and I'm really not sure how the NFL is going to evaluate him. Maybe they take him in the top 40 because he's like so explosive, but they also could wait till day 3, like 4th round or early in the 3rd round or something like that to take him. So he's got a lot more question marks than someone like Devontae Smith has. So when you line everything up, all things being equal, and you check all the boxes one by one, it makes sense why I would have Smith higher based on my process, right? Because the only question I have about Devontae Smith is his weight, really. That's really the only question I have about him. Everything else checks out to me. So whereas Rondell Moore and a number of other prospects in this class have more concerns that are not weight related or something like that. So we're going to get into the pre-draft stuff first. This is the process that we're in right now. If you guys are watching this, it's probably before the NFL draft. That was a lot of analytical talk that I just got into. So let's talk about film. And again, as always, searching for the offense, i.e. Alabama offense versus or offensive line versus, is the best way to find film of these players. And again, prioritize good competition against good corners if you can possibly find them, and try to diversify by watching statistical games where they performed well and where they performed poorly. So the 6 traits, I talked about the 6 traits for all the other positions, the 6 traits plus a bonus one that I value most for evaluating wide receivers. These traits are easy to see on film, in my opinion. And using the database in this draft guide, you can cross-reference what you see with the database for the wide receiver position located in the positional databases tab. As you can see on the screen right now, you have a number of different metrics that are all from paid resources that you won't find anywhere else. The first metric that we're going to talk about, or the first trait that we're going to talk about, is separation. Can you get open? However you do it. Can you get open with speed like Jalen Waddle? Can you get open with agility like Devontae Smith? Or can you get open with physicality like Jamar Chase? There's numerous ways of getting open, but the bottom line is, can you get open so that your quarterback throws you the ball? The metrics you can use to determine if this is if someone's effective in this area are yards per route run, which is probably the most sticky statistic for wide receiver success. Passer rating when targeted usually means that they made good things happen when their quarterback threw them the ball as well. So separation is it's the most fundamental job of a receiver. If you're playing on the playground at recess, you're throwing to the guy that got open. That's basically what's happening. Second part of that is hands. Can you actually catch the ball once it's thrown to you? A lot of guys can get open, but can you catch the ball? And we saw that with Jerry Jeudy and Deontay Johnson this past year. Those guys are tremendous route runners, and they can get open against anybody, but they couldn't catch the ball consistently, and they left a lot of fantasy points on the table as a result. So the ways you can evaluate this, obviously using film, can they catch the ball consistently, and are their hands an asset, meaning do they catch things that they probably shouldn't have even caught in contested situations or whatever the case is. You can use catch percentage, drops, and drop percentage to evaluate how good their hands are. Next is yak ability. Once you got open, once you caught the ball, what'd you do with it? Can you make things happen after the catch once you've gotten open and caught the ball? Yards after catch per reception, and avoided tackles and avoided tackle percentage. Some guys are good after the catch in space. They're good. They're very elusive. Some guys, like Jamar Chase, for example, as you'll see on the screen, is more of that physicality, physical presence, running back type after the catch, where he breaks tackles rather than avoiding them. So again, there's so many different body types and types of receivers in this draft, and a number of guys can do things different ways, but the underlying point is still there. Can they make things happen after the catch? Very important to do so. We've seen from guys like A.J. Brown and Chris Godwin and a number of other players that yak ability can help you win a week in fantasy. So the fourth one is the ability to impact all three levels of the field. And again, this isn't necessarily a requirement, because we've seen Michael Thomas, who doesn't impact the deep game of the field, be an elite fantasy receiver. He was the wide receiver 1 2 years ago. But what it took for Michael Thomas to get that is very rare. He broke the receptions record for a wide receiver. So unless you can anticipate someone being that good in short to intermediate, it's pretty hard to bet on them. But you can use their ability to impact all three levels of the field by measuring their deep targets, deep target percentage, deep touchdowns, deep receiving yards, and then also slot production, slot percentage, slot targets, slot receiving yards, all that kind of stuff. Basically, what you want to know is that, is this receiver a slot receiver? Is this receiver a deep threat? Is he a possession receiver? Can he do a little bit of everything? Because ideally, you want more versatility, because more versatility equals a higher ceiling for fantasy. Because when you see a guy like Julio Jones, for example, who's a deep threat, a slot receiver, a possession receiver, a contested catch guy all in one, that's how you get an elite option. So kind of weighing what everybody does well. Not a lot of players in this draft and players in the NFL can do it all. But when you find someone that can do it all, like Jamar Chase, for example, that's when you have an elite prospect on your hands. So fifth is athleticism. Is he fast enough to stretch a defense? Agile enough to make defenders miss? Is he strong enough to break defenders off? How good of an athlete is this player? And the best way to measure this is, normally we'd have the NFL scouting combine going on right about now, but this year obviously is a little bit different. So you're going to have to go off of pro day results, which will make up their weight adjusted speed score, which is very important. Their 40 time, their agility drills, any kind of strength drills that they do. And then as well as maybe you want to look up some YouTube videos of their actual workout itself. Those are all going to go into how good of an athlete they are. Sixth is the one that I already talked about, production and analytics. All the stuff I discussed in the benchmarks goes into this, but height, weight, breakout age, college dominator, and draft capital are the 5 most important production and analytics measures that you want to go through. But also raw production is important too. A guy who wins the Bolitnikoff Award because he has 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns definitely isn't going to hurt his draft stock or his ability to produce at the next level. And here's the 7th one. Here's the bonus one that I talked about. I want to see receivers be a dog. To be a receiver in the NFL is a tough job. It's a job that requires a little bit of ego to do. You think of the best receivers around the league over the past couple of years. You think of the Antonio Browns and the Odell Beckhams and these guys that are kind of divas that have the like competitiveness that makes you kind of dislike them at times. Being a dog is my favorite thing about watching a receiver. When I see a tough and a smart player as well that is ultra competitive, there's no metric to measure this, right? There's no way you can measure this. It's only a film related thing. But the best guys around the league have this trait, and you can recognize it, especially when they don't have the ball in their hands, when they're blocking in the run game or their teammate just caught a huge play or something. Like, that's when you really see this trait come out. But it shows up in both aspects. I want to see a dude, and Devontae Smith is the best example of this. When you moss a defender, when you catch a ball over the guy's head, pluck it right off of his helmet, get up and tell him how much better you are than he is, right to his face. That is the type of thing I love to see from college receivers, and there's some dogs in this class. So that's one thing that I would strongly encourage you guys to look for, as well as toughness, competitiveness, and intelligence as well. Again, no way to that; those are all subjective, no way to actually measure those, but I do think they're important. So that's all the pre-draft stuff we're going to talk about for the wide receiver position. We're going to get into the post-draft stuff now. And again, draft capital, as I mentioned, once again, draft capital leads to more belief in the player in the eyes of the organization. It's been quite predictive of success in the past, 20 out of 25, as I mentioned. And it's definitely easier just in general to bet on a first-round receiver to continue to get opportunities rather than a fifth-round receiver. In a fifth-round receiver's case, the coaching staff is, like, the GM, first of all, isn't paying them that much. Second of all, they don't have that much incentive to believe that they're going to be some number one receiver in the NFL. For example, Darius Slayton with the New York Giants doesn't have as much trust from his coaching staff as, say, Jalen Reagor does with the Eagles, because Jalen Reagor was a first-round pick. Again, landing spot, so crucial. It's so crucial to every position, and the draft process doesn't stop once these guys get drafted. Once they get drafted, we're not like, all right, so the same grades that we had going into the draft is the same grades that we have coming out of it. No, landing spot matters. It's very complex for the receiver position. It's really hard to evaluate, but because you can never estimate what his chemistry is going to be with his new quarterback, what his usage is going to be, how the coaching staff is going to deploy him, target distribution. You never know that either. But I think the easiest way to evaluate a wide receiver landing spot, and again, we will have you covered in this area on YouTube if you guys want to just rely on us for this, is to examine the production hierarchy in the offense. For example, when you think about AJ Brown a couple of years ago, when he was drafted by Tennessee, what was the target hierarchy in his offense that allowed him to succeed? They had Corey Davis, who was a former first-round pick, but had yet to actually produce anything. So there was no clear alpha target when AJ Brown got to the offense. And if everything you determined to be in the pre-draft process was, hey, this is a really talented player, AJ Brown can really play, he has the potential to be a number one in this league, then an opening for a number one receiver position in the NFL, or even a high-end number two, should be attainable to become a top 12 fantasy receiver. So if you would have went into Tennessee's or AJ Brown's rookie season in Tennessee, you might have been like, he plays with Mariota, it's not necessarily the greatest offense, but at the bare minimum, he had a potential to become a number one receiver. And of course, with all positions, it's important to look at coaching tendencies as well, especially if the coach has had receivers of the same mold and QB play in the past as well. So if you guys listened to us in the summer, you guys would have heard me talk about how I thought Henry Ruggs was a great fit in Las Vegas because John Gruden used Joey Galloway in Tampa Bay, who's a speed receiver, and I thought he was going to deploy Henry Ruggs in that same manner. Now, of course, we didn't necessarily get to see that because Ruggs was dealing with injuries and the whole offensive team of the Las Vegas Raiders was dealing with injuries. Maybe we'll get a better prediction or indication of that this year. Hopefully for my Henry Ruggs share's sake, that is the case. But again, once again, we will delve into landing spots big time come May following the NFL draft. So if you guys don't want to deal with this area, we will have you covered. But again, landing spot, just honestly, just keep checking boxes. If they have a great quarterback, great coaching staff, they score a lot of points, like all that stuff plays into it. Less target competition. The more boxes they can check, the better in terms of their landing spot. But again, we will have you covered. So that's it for the wide receiver position. I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown of my mindset when I'm looking at wide receiver prospects and how you can adopt some of the ways and watch these guys for yourself. Make sure, again, as always, to check out all the other videos relating to the other positions in this series, and also check out the databases of the statistics of the four positions as well, and all the other content that's going to be in this draft guide. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Peace out.